Welcome to the Profitable Speaking Podcast, where we help you build a profitable six-figure business from the stage. Here's your host, Mr. Web Marketing, Brad Hauck. Welcome to episode 23 of the Profitable Speaking Podcast, where we provide practical tips and insights in how to help you succeed as a public speaker. In today's episode, we'll be discussing a common challenge that many speakers face: handling difficult audience questions during a conference talk. Whether it's a challenging question from a skeptical audience member or a hostile comment from someone looking to pick a fight, difficult questions can throw even the most experienced speakers off their game. But fear not, because in this episode, we'll be sharing some proven strategies for handling difficult audience questions with grace and poise. So, if you're looking to improve your ability to navigate tough questions and maintain your composure under pressure, you don't want to miss this episode. Let's go. Dealing with difficult questions during a speech can be really disrupting to your flow. But it is what it is. You need to get used to it. You are going to get questions, especially if you're presenting information that is interesting to your audience. If you're going to prepare a speech, you need to prepare for questions as well. It's really normal to get questions from the audience. It really is. Most audiences will be interested in what you have to say, and it will raise questions in their mind. There are things that you can do to cut down the number of questions you get, and we're going to look at that further in the podcast. Remember, when you get really good at dealing with questions, it makes you look even more expert, okay? It's well worth getting good at dealing with questions. The crowd, on the other hand, normally doesn't like someone who asks multiple questions. So they're really on your side. So understand, while you're learning to deal with questions, the crowd's actually backing you to be able to deal with the person who's asking questions, especially if they're asked 3 or 4 questions. That said, it's always good advice to limit people to 1 question each. So how can you set yourself up for success when answering questions? Let's have a look at some of the ways we can do this. For number 1, we need to understand the nature of a difficult question. It's important to recognize that difficult questions can come from a variety of sources, such as curiosity, skepticism, disagreement, or even just hostility. Understanding the underlying motivation of the person asking that is behind these questions can help you to better respond to them. So, something to think about: did you fail to cover certain information in your talk, and therefore you leave this person questioning about a certain part of what you've talked about? Missed information, while it might have been taken out for a reason, maybe you need to look at your speech and putting it back in again. So sometimes questions like this actually highlight something that's wrong with your speech. Other times people are digging in more depth than you wanted to cover. On the other hand, maybe you just needed to provide more depth. So understand what's going on behind the question. Sometimes that means asking a question of the questioner just to clarify something. Sometimes it's also obvious in the way they ask the question. Number 2, you need to prepare for difficult questions. The potential is always there. So before giving your talk, it's a good idea to anticipate potential difficult questions that your audience might ask you. This can help you prepare in your mind these thoughtful and informed responses rather than being caught off guard. And this is something I've talked about many times, not only with, say, website content where you have FAQs, but also when you're doing a presentation, because there's a lot of power in answering the questions that come from the audience before they actually asked. So sit back and review a few previous presentations and see what people have asked. This is the first hint that there may be repetitive questions, in which case you need to fix up what you're saying to cover this, because everybody's thinking the same thing. How do I do that then? Or why did you do that? Or something. Go ahead and make a list of all those questions. Another thing you could do is you could use a tool like AI, so ChatGPT or something, and ask them, based on the topic, some potential questions that people might have about that topic. So you could take some of the information that you've got, maybe get a transcript of your speech, feed it into the AI and get it at the speech and give you some potential questions. Another thing you can do is ask a friend who's seen you speak. Do you think there was something I could have covered better, or was there any questions in your mind when you were going through? And lastly, the one I think is really important is get a mentor speaker to watch you do your speech and get them to make notes about where there was potential questions or the questions that the audience asked, or even some that they have in their own head. Number 3, you need to remain calm and composed. When you get a difficult question, it's important to stay calm on stage. Avoid getting defensive or argumentative. Okay, this just escalates the situation, and it can also make it more difficult to address the question because you can't think straight when you're angry. Don't get riled up by your audience. If there's someone there being a jerk, well, let them be a jerk. Remember, most of the audience is behind you. They're backing you. So they're out there going, hey, this guy's a nutter, or whatever it is they're thinking. So you've got to understand that. So don't get riled up on stage. Stay calm. Take a breath. Think about an answer and then answer them honestly. Remember, you're going to expect the question, or you're going to expect some questions. Don't get all flustered when you get a question that seems like it might be a little bit difficult. If you know your topic well, then you should have no problems answering questions. If you don't know your topic well and you're talking on a topic that you don't really know, then you actually need to get a lot better, or don't do that topic. And remember, if you can't answer a question fully, the best way to deal with it is to be honest, okay? Get them to come and see you afterwards, or say, I'll get back to you with an answer on that. So remain calm and composed. Number 4, you need to listen to the person actively. Often, I know as a guy, someone asks me a question, I'm already thinking of the answer instead of actually listening to everything they say. And I don't know how that is for other people, but for me, that can be a problem. I know my wife always says, you've got that far away look in your eyes, which means I'm actually thinking about how I'm going to answer her instead of listening to everything she's asking me. Now, I know that's not on stage, but that's the way my brain works. It's important to listen actively to the question being asked and to make sure you fully understand it before responding. Make sure you clarify anything you don't understand, because that will ensure that you're addressing the question as accurately and as effectively as you can. Don't just assume something about the question, okay? Listen to the tone, listen to the way they're asking. Ask a question. For example, understand what their business is, maybe, or what's your business? Oh, great, okay. And then answer based on that so you can personalize it a bit. Remember, stop thinking and listen. Breathe and then answer. Get more details if you need to. Don't get caught up in your own thinking. And also, remember, you've got a time limit, so keep things moving along, okay? Don't get caught in a big conversation with someone. Even though you're listening actively, get the concise question. And sometimes that's a case of actually setting it up before you take questions. It's like, look, before you have a question, obviously we've got a limited amount of time. Can you just have a think about it and keep it nice and short? And if you need a longer answer, I can talk to you later. So set it up for a conversation off stage. Number 5, acknowledge the questioner's perspective. We talked a little bit about this in the first one. Even if you disagree with the question being asked, it's important to acknowledge the perspective of the person asking the question. This can help demonstrate that you're taking the question seriously, and it can also build rapport with your audience. Find out what industry they're in. Find out what their experience is. And quite often this is in the question. I was doing this, and then we had this person come in and they did that, and we found this happened. Okay? Have they experienced it, or is it a rhetorical question? Sometimes people will say they've actually experienced this. Other people are looking at it and they're putting themselves in the picture frame going forward. If I did this, then what would happen? So it's more a rhetorical question so that they can understand what the results could possibly be, etc. Okay? Again, understand their perspective to give them the right answer. A question answered with a question is not wrong, as long as you then come back with a full answer. Number 6, provide thoughtful responses. When responding to difficult questions, it's important to provide thoughtful and well-informed responses. Avoid simply dismissing the question or providing a superficial answer. Okay, people don't like superficial answers. Be honest with them. Talk honestly, just like you would a friend. Take the time to provide a detailed and answer the question properly in a way that addresses the question as fully as possible. If you don't know the answer to a question, just tell the audience, be honest. Seriously, I'm sorry, actually, I don't have an answer for you on that, but I'd like to find out because it's a very interesting question. So can you give me your card afterwards and I'll come back to you with an answer? Great business opportunities come from these sorts of questions. And make sure you do get back to them with an answer. When you get a question, think before you spit out an automatic answer. I've seen this before where it's just an automated response almost from the brain that, bam, there's the answer. But again, if you're not listening to the nuances and the question and what's behind the question, that might not apply at all. It's just generic. And people aren't after generic answers when they're asking you from the audience. And also remember, this audience is probably paying to see you in one way or another. They're either paying for the breakfast or they're paying for a conference or whatever it happens to be. So they're paying money. Be thoughtful. Remember that, okay? Providing something to them. It's not them coming to you and about making you feel good. This is about you teaching them something and helping them to succeed. That's why you're there. It's not about you. Number 7, redirect the conversation or the question if necessary. Sometimes a difficult question may not be directly related to your talk, and it could even be outside your area of expertise. In these cases, it might be necessary to redirect the conversation back to your main topic or suggest alternative resources for the questioner to look at. Be honest with them. Tell them, look, that's outside of what I'm covering today. Or if it's later in your talk, say, oh, great question. Hold that thought. I'll be coming to that a little later. And make sure that obviously it's covered. Don't just fob them off by using that. Be honest. Like if it's coming later, it's coming later. If it's not, just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to cover that today, but I'd be glad to have a chat with you afterwards. Okay? That way they feel they're being listened to and respected. And also you're making a connection there where you can have a chat with someone afterwards, which is always a fantastic opportunity for a speaker to grow their business. Number 8, end your questioning on a positive note. It's important to end your response on a positive note. So when someone gives you a question, make sure that leave it on a positive note, like a positive thing that they can do or something, at least some step that they can take away. Thank the question for their question. If it's a long response, just summarize it in a quick sentence and reiterate any key points you've covered. This can ensure that, the interaction ends on a positive and constructive note, even if it's been a little bit messy when you're answering. Smile at the person when they ask you the question. Thank them for the question. When someone asks me a question and I need time to think, or even if I don't, I'll often say, great question, or that's a very interesting question, or oh, I haven't had that question before. You make a good point. These little statements actually make it easy for you to think, but also makes it a positive thing from the audience, because the person in the audience who gets that goes, oh, I asked a great question. And honestly, it probably is a great question, because if one person asked it, I can guarantee, as we all know, there's multiple people in the room who are thinking the same thing. Often when I finish all my questions, I'll say, look, hopefully all those questions help, everybody in the room there, and you've got a little bit further information out of them. So that's the 8 things I wanted to cover this morning. Questions are a result of the great information you're giving. People are trying to clarify how that applies in their world. Remember what it's like to sit in an audience when you approach them with an answer. Be respectful, be understanding, and be helpful. You wouldn't want a sarcastic answer, would you? No. Answering questions professionally has got me many contracts over the years. People can be just testing you, but they could also be trying to find out whether you're the person that they need to work with. Remember that. It's really important. I hope the insights and strategies we've shared will help you feel more confident and prepared next time you're faced with difficult audience questions during a talk. Remember, being able to handle tough questions with grace and poise is a key skill for any public speaker. And with practice, you can master it. If you enjoyed this podcast and found value in the information about handling difficult audience questions during conference talk, I'd be over the moon if you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And hey, why not spread the love? If you know another speaker who could benefit from this information, be sure to share this podcast with them. We're all about helping speakers grow their business and succeed. And with your help, I can reach even more people. So go ahead, hit that share button and help us make a difference. Thanks for tuning in to the Profitable Speaking Podcast. Until next time, keep speaking, keep growing, and keep making an impact. Thanks for listening to the Profitable Speaking Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please help a friend and share it with them. Until next time, we hope you have a fun and profitable week.